is DCB Horticulture from our DCB greenhouse coming to you guys for Green Thursdays. Hopefully you guys remember this month of May we are working with the organization called Farms. We're going to be going over a bit more into detail on the different programs and activities we have here at Dakota College. So last week we went over the horticulture program, and this week we're here with GK, one of our hemp students, and Keith Knutson, our hemp production program instructor and advisor, to talk about the hemp program that started this spring here at DCB. Also, just a reminder, we did post one of our recorded videos yesterday, and that is Cody Cummington from the North Dakota Forestry Department talking about the history and the relationship between Dakota College of Botano and the Forestry Department and some of the activities that are going on today as that friendship and collaboration continues. So if you get a chance, look on the DCB Horticulture Facebook page and find that link and give it a watch, because there's a lot of really neat information there. So again, this is Amy Kohler, and I'm here with GK and Keith Knutson, and I'm going to switch this over and we'll get started with them, and they'll start talking about our hemp production program and even give you guys a little sneak peek into how a hemp plant cutting can be done. All right. All right, here's Keith and GK.
Hi. So my name is Keith Knutson. I'm the hemp instructor here at Dakota College, and we began our hemp production program this year in January, and we had 6 students in our classes. We had 2 classes. We had one in lecture class where we talked about industrial hemp and hemp production, and then we also had a practicum where we were working in our greenhouse here and propagating some of our hemp plants and growing some of our hemp plants. Today I just want to talk to you a little bit about hemp itself. There's quite a history in hemp. Hemp has been in our civilization for thousands and thousands of years, and we originally used it a lot way back when with ships on sails, building fabric with the sails, and also the ropes. Those are also very important parts, but way back then we also used the fabric
for banners, making our banners, and even hemp for is used for hemp for victory. There was a video on hemp for victory where the American soldiers had to use hemp so that we could have more production of wood and ropes and banners to be supplied to most of the soldiers that were there. And not just that, even clothes that were made, even masks that were made out of hemp banners. And there are a lot of medicinal benefits too with hemp. I would let Keith dive deep into that.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Just a little bit more on history. The Declaration of Independence, the first draft, was written on hemp paper by Jefferson. The first flag was built out of hemp fabric, and so back then hemp fabric was very important because it was very durable, a lot more durable than cotton. It seemed like the colors didn't fade as much in hemp also. And it was really promoted by the United States government for farmers to grow hemp. So it was very important back then.
Yes, and there were tax rebates too at that point for people growing hemp, so that the government was even promoting hemp so that people can grow it, because it was consuming less water at that point compared to cotton.
Right, and hemp back then was so important that when farmers paid their taxes, they were allowed to pay in hemp, which is very interesting. So things kind of turned around in the early 1900s, about 1930s. 1937 actually was when we had a law that was put in place which prohibited us from growing hemp. And one of the reasons for that, the main reason for that, was because of marijuana, which was a part of hemp. Hemp is also marijuana, but it's how you culture it, it's how you grow it. And so there was a law that prohibited farmers at that point from growing hemp. And then it kind of switched around again in World War II, where we needed the hemp for rope making. So then the government gave farmers licenses to grow hemp so that they could make these rope products and other fabric products. And then it really, nothing really happened with hemp for many years. And then in the, I think it was about in the mid-1990s when we started to see some value from hemp seed. And so at that point then, the United States government started to import hemp seed as a food product for us to have to eat, and it was a very valuable product. We'll talk about some of that too.
Definitely. It was a very good dietary supplement and very nutritious. We'll get deep into that.
Right. So then in, I think the next date was 2007, when there was 6 farmers in North Dakota that were given the first hemp license to grow hemp, and it was more on a trial basis to see if they could find hemp plants that work really well. And then, of course, in 2018, our Congress allowed us to go ahead and have hemp and get licensed for hemp. So at that point then, the Congress said, okay, each state needs to control your own hemp. And so North Dakota Ag Department then set up a licensing activity where they were able to grow hemp.
Yes.
We were able to grow hemp. So I'm a farmer that has a license to grow hemp. I filled out the application. And then also, we needed to do a background check. So once a farmer gets through that part, they get a license and they're allowed to grow hemp. Now there's a difference. I mentioned before about marijuana. There's a difference between marijuana and hemp. And if you look at their genetic background, they're identically alike. They're both cannabis sativas, but they were grown, they were cultured to be different, have different values of THC in it. And so the hemp that we grow here is a very, very low THC value.
Yeah, it just has 0.03, and that is the minimum requirement that is set by the government. And if any of the hemp at any point of time goes beyond THC during the harvest time, so the entire lot would have to be destroyed. So that's a federal regulation that's being made up for many farmers who are producing hemp.
Yeah, so THC is a psychoactive drug, and some people call it pot.
Yeah.
Some people call it marijuana.
There's so many names for that, yeah.
But we don't go there. We make sure that our plants stay below the 0.3. We monitor our plants so that that does not happen, and so we can honestly say we have hemp plants here. There's several different uses for hemp plants, and they are grown differently. So one use is, of course, what we talked about, is a food, and so hemp can be grown as a food, and what it is the seed from the hemp is then ground up,
down, yes.
and sometimes it's just the hull that's taken off.
Yes, just about. And it's called broken hearts.
Broken hearts,
Yes.
or hemp hearts.
Hemp hearts.
Yes, there you
Yes.
go. So, and it's very high
In protein, fats, and omegas.
Yeah.
I mean, omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9.
Right. So
All the acids.
yeah, it's a very good food for us. And
Dietary supplement, yes.
I use it I make pancakes with it, and it's excellent for making pancakes. There's another one, there's hemp for fiber, and that is mainly just like it says, it's fiber, it's for fabrics. They use it sometimes in ways in which they strengthen material. One is an automobile.
Automobile industry, where most of the automobiles are moving to hemp fibers rather than plastic fiber, which is it takes a lot of time to decay in the natural system. But hemp decomposes really, really fast, so it can be shaped any way that you want, and it also doesn't catch fire, which is a major plus point for having it in the automobile industry.
And so then that hemp is also used as an insulation.
Insulation too.
It's a good insulation for homes. It's not as good as fiberglass, but it is more sustainable carbon
Capturing, yes. Sequestering too. It's sequestering a lot of carbon, and carbon sequestering is done. It purifies the air too at the same time as the air is moving within your household or any of the structure that you're there in. So it purifies the air, and it's called hempcrete. That's what it's called.
Yes.
The insulation that we use is called hempcrete. That's what it's called.
It doesn't have a lot of real strong structure like
it's really
like concrete, but it is light,
Yes.
and it's airy, and it really buffers the outside. North Dakota is really important for this. really buffers the outside coldness to the inside
Yes,
coldness. So
it regulates the temperature outside and inside.
And it also regulates humidity relatively.
Oh yes.
So I think it has a lot of potential in the future. So.
Oh yeah. Now there are different hemp, one for fiber and one for CBD. So we are currently doing CBD up here in Dakota College at Botany. We're not focusing toward fibers because they're really huge. They grow to 12 to 14 feet. But CBD, they don't grow that huge, so we can grow it in greenhouse. And that's the setup that we have here. And I would like to talk a little bit more about this.
So CBD, when we get CBD from our plants, it's actually extracted from the very surfaces of the leaf and the flower of the plant. And it's extracted on a part of the plant called trichomes. And they look like little mushrooms, and they're very shiny, very sparkly on top of the leaves and the flowers. And in that very shiny trichome is the cannabinoids that we use for CBD purposes. And so, of course, CBD is kind of getting known for its medicinal purposes to help individuals who have anxiety issues.
Elderly people who haven't had any good results with the drugs that they're being used or that they've been suggested, like opioids. They're not working good with their body because their bodies are too weak to work for the opioids. So CBD has turned out to be a very good compound in the medical industry or in the relaxation industry, or I should say recreation industry. Apart from just being medical marijuana, it turns out to be that you can also use CBD oil as a recreational stuff and also medical benefits too at the same time. I've even heard from Keith that he uses it for his mother. He uses CBD oil for his mother.
We do. We use it in our family. I have arthritis, and it's really helpful for me too. So it does reduce the pain. It doesn't make it go away, but it's really helpful. There is another part of hemp that is very interesting, and it's called terpenes. Mm-hmm. And the terpenes are that smell that you get. So hemp is very capable of having many different terpenes. Example of terpenes is oranges. The orange plant, the orange itself, when you go to peel an orange, the smell, that's a terpene. And then we have lemons that are a terpene, pines are a terpene. There's just a lot of different terpenes. So they're able to produce a lot of different smells. Lavender's another lavender.
Yes, so anything that has a pungent smell, that smell comes from these terpenes that are there in different plants.
And hemp has that ability to bring on those terpenes. Now people go, well, why does a plant need terpenes? Well, the main reason why the plant uses terpenes is to ward off pests. And so over time, plants have developed to the point where they've got these terpenes in place that wards pests or makes pests go away from them instead of being attracted to them.
Yes, and as such, hemp is also a very hardy plant with respect to pests. They're very resilient plants, and they can handle droughts too at the same time apart from just fighting with pests. So they like colder conditions too, which makes it really appropriate to grow in North Dakota. The conditions in North Dakota is just apt to grow hemp at this point, I would say. Because back in India, that's where the coldest places are, where you have some cold and some temperature which goes down, where we have longer light hours. That's where you see a lot of hemp being grown back home in India too. And North Dakota is just the same. So hemp likes northern parts of any country, northern parts of most of the continents too. So I think hemp would be a very good cash crop for most of the farmers in North Dakota, and we should focus on various other benefits that come with hemp too, apart from just the dietary benefits or just the medical benefits. But there are so many other sustainable benefits too that the hemp does for us, because it can also take out any radioactivity that is there from the soil too.
It does. It's very good at pulling some of those contaminants out of soil.
It is actively being used in Russia and Japan, where nuclear disasters have happened already.
So let's talk about this greenhouse a little bit.
Yeah.
You see some very large plants in here. They're yellowing just a little bit. These plants, I took cuttings from my plants out in my field at my farm last fall. And when you take a cutting from the plant you take the cuttings from is called a mother plant. And so these are actually, they were at one time daughter plants, but now they are mother plants because we have taken cuttings off of those. And those cuttings, and if I can show you this one right here, is cuttings that we took off of some of those plants right there. These are called daughter plants. And actually they could call them granddaughter plants, but we're going to call them daughter plants. And so today GK and I are going to show you how to take cuttings. We call cuttings from hemp, we call them clones. And that is kind of a generic term that in general that we use anyway, but we call it in our classes in the hemp business, we call them cloning. And so cloning is where you take a part of a plant, you cut off part of that plant, and then you try to promote root growth on that. So if we look here, we're going to take a cutting someplace right in this area right here. One of the important parts of making sure that you've got a good cutting, whether it's a hemp plant or other plants, and you can actually clone or get cuttings off of just about any plant. Some are more difficult than other plants, but you can typically get clones. So what GK is doing right now is he's cutting off the major leaves, and at every location where you see him cutting off, that's called a node. N-O-D-E, and then in between it's an inner node, that space in between. So where that node is, especially on hemp plants, that's where we'll get new root growth. And so we want to make sure we get one of those locations in the soil. But before he does that, now he's going to add a rooting compound. And as you can see here, he's trimming off some of the leaves. The reason why we trim off leaves is because these plants have a lot of evaporation going on, and the plant will die from lack of moisture because there's no roots on this plant. So we're going to cut some of the leaves off. It really doesn't harm the plant. It actually helps the plant stay healthy. And then we'll put it in water briefly, and then we'll go ahead and put some rooting compound on it.
Yeah, we usually put it into the water just in case, so that the plant doesn't die or it doesn't callus doesn't form, so that when callus forms, the roots would not grow. So we would usually put it into water so that we can take all the clones just like that. But right now, as I have just only one clone, I usually would not put into water, but I would just take it and demonstrate what we would be doing.
And normally when we do it, we'll do lots of
clones, yeah. Not just one or two. We would have close to 70 to 80 to 100 or 120, depending on how many clones we get out of the mother plant.
Right. And we'll put them in water and let them sit in water for just a little bit.
Yeah.
Now we apply what we call rooting compound. And that's a compound that has a natural acid in it that helps that plant bring down some of the acids in the top part of the plant and develop some roots at that node. So the final step, almost the final step, is then to place that plant into it. And you can see GK has really got it down to that second node, so there's really two opportunities for roots to grow there. And then of course what we want to immediately do is provide some water in that soil. And then in addition to that, we want to make sure that we mist that plant a couple times during the day. And what that does is it allows some of that moisture to come in through the leaves to the plant. So it's a simple process, and you can use this cutting process on a lot of different plants. I remember my first experience, it was African violets that my grandmother had done, and I thought, well, that's never going to work. But she said, yes, it will. And of course it did. So one other thing I should mention about all the plants that we have in here, in order for CBD purposes, they all must be female plants, because we don't get good CBD production off of male plants. Actually, there's hardly any on it. And if the female plant goes to seed, then that female puts all of her energy into growing the seed and not having CBD. And then also, so just to kind of recap, these plants here are mother plants. We brought them in January. They were about that tall at that time. And Now they're 3 to 4 feet tall, and they've been clipped several times. They've been pruned back several times, and they've done really, really well. So we give them lots of light. We give them about 18 hours of light a day, and now we're getting to the point where the sun is going to do that for us. So they are doing well in here.
So once we do the cloning process, we let them in here in the flats for 10 to 15 days. And how do you know they're ready to transplant? So what we usually do is we try to pick up any of the plants and try to pull it a little bit. If you feel any resistance, that means that there is roots that are growing and it's ready to be pulled out. And I'm just pulling this and I don't feel any resistance. So I see that this is not grown any roots. Let me just try something else. Yeah, I feel a resistance here. Yep. And do you see it's ready to be transplanted right now? You see the root, it has very good root structure and it's just trying to grow even more. So I'm just gonna let it go in there. But this is how you know, you just try to tug it a little bit. If you feel any restriction, that means that yes, there is root growth that's happened and it's ready to be transplanted.
And you will see yellowing on the leaves, and that's mainly because the plant has got new leaves coming right through the center, and some of those old leaves the plant will let die off, and actually the plant has the ability to pull all the nutrients out of those old leaves and put it back into the stem again, so that the new leaves have lots of good growth, and we're just beginning to see that on these plants.
So this semester we're all about using the plants that we had and propagating more, but the next semester we would be moving to the next stage, which would be harvesting and then processing. So this is a very good program that we have in DCB right now, the hemp program, which doesn't just talk to you about just growing the plants, but also about how do you harvest them, how do you treat them, how are they supposed to be processed to achieve the end product that you're trying to get to, because there are so many different processes that you can use depending on what the end product that you're trying to get to. So this is a very good introduction to all the things that are there in the hemp industry and all the other things, that developments that are happening in the hemp industry, to how it's revolutionizing the farmers that are there in the United States at this point. Our neighbors in Canada, they have been doing really, really good with hemp. I think we're gonna take a couple more things from them and exchange all the research that we have at North Dakota do with them and move a little bit more further from there. But right now it's a very good time to grow hemp. Right now the sun is coming out, and yes, out there in the fields, we're just going to transplant some of them coming next week. So I hope we have some more video in the future, and so that we can keep you posted on what's being done with all the plants that we have in here.
Well, awesome. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions about the hemp production program, you can always source your questions out to the DCB Horticulture page, and we'll make sure they get to either Keith Knudsen or GK here, because we love to always answer questions. And once all this social distancing and everything's able to open up, I believe Keith and GK love to give tours. And again, this is a brand new program we have here at DCB. It started just brand new this spring, and hopefully in the future we may have some internship possibilities. We're always looking for new students, and it just kind of brings it back, as you can see, about that hands-on experience students get here at DCB. And that's always a really exciting thing for us. So thank you guys so much for everything and coming and join us today. Don't forget, next week we're going to be again with me and GK also talking about the aquaponics program and a bit more in detail about that, and show some of those great hands-on activities that our students get to do and develop. Because we have our student here, GK, he is just a jack of all trades. He's a hemp student and an aquaponics student. He's just into everything. Because of all that hands-on experience. And then also look forward for our recording next week. We'll be talking with Holly Mobby, and we're going to talk about food safety in our wash and pack facility as well. So hope everyone has a great week. Stay safe, and we'll see you next Thursday. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.